Welcome to the ReaderHouse Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. Mulligan, the new book by Jessie Adkinson, is a story of faith and friendship from a creative perspective. And we're going to be talking all about this. The author Jessie is here with me now. Jessie, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Thank you for being here with me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really interested in Mulligan and what readers can find here. Jessie, can you tell me about it?
Yes, so Mulligan is a children's Christian story. It is about a turtle who idolizes a character called Alligator Ace, and it's kind of like a sports theme that's around golf. And he just wants to be everything the Alligator Ace is. He wants to emulate every little thing he does, from his clothes to how he acts. And he gives him an item, and Mulligan thinks that this item is going to just solve his life, this good luck charm.
What sorts of readers are really going to be into Mulligan, Jessie?
So I based it off of elementary-aged children for them to kind of just understand the lesson of, you can have different, characters in your life that you look up to, but not to change yourself to be them, and that you can't rely on good luck charms and different things. You need to rely on your faith in God.
So what inspired this story? What sparked this for you?
Well, my son was very, very sick. He was in the PICU. He was aspirating into his lungs and went into sepsis. And during that time, the story just kind of was laid on my heart. And it kind of was teaching me a lesson at that time. I was having a really hard time just putting my faith in God that he was going to be okay and that he was going to survive, and kept almost doing things in an OCD way, touching different things, thinking that if I did things a very certain and exact routine way, it would keep him alive. And finally, my husband really convinced me, no, it's got to be your faith in God, and you've got to trust that you've asked him and that he's going to take care of him. And then the story just it was laid on my heart. And as soon as we got home from the hospital, weeks later, I just wrote out the story that was playing in my head.
How long of a process was this for you, both the writing and then getting it published, all that?
Writing the story down itself took just one night. I stayed up from midnight till 2 a.m. the night we got home. It was right after Christmas, going to New Year's. We spent Christmas at the hospital. And then after I wrote it in a little book that the hospital gave you, little craft books to try to keep yourself busy if your kid was sick. And I wrote it in there. And for 13 months, it sat in there until I started putting it out into the world. And as soon as I put it out into the world, it was just a few months later that I was contacted. And then about a year process for it to go to print.
So are you new to all of this, to the writing and publishing thing, or have you some experience in it?
I do not have any experience. I did win Young Georgia Authors when I was in 4th grade. My sister-in-law is an author, but I just kind of put it out there myself and wrote it and just had faith that there was a message to tell that God laid on my heart, and I was going to honor him and put it out there.
So you wrote this fairly quickly, and then you handed this off to your publisher, Christian Faith, and then you start that whole publishing process. So what was the most challenging part of that publishing process for you?
The most challenging part, I think, was trying to understand what all needed to be done and to go through it, knowing what was edited, what had to be reviewed, how to check it, those types of things, since it was brand new to me. They were great, walked me through the process, but I'm a person that likes to question and understand every single thing. And so that part was a little lengthy for me.
Well, if you think about it, now you're officially a published author. So, Jessie, what's the most rewarding aspect of it for you?
The most rewarding so far has been when I've done the book signings and I have met total strangers and they've come up and they've shared their testimony. Some of them have fallen away from Christ. They did not grow up knowing him. They knew him and then lost their faith. Some grew up knowing Christ and then they've lost their faith, and just sitting there talking to them, and they've had children now and they wanted to reach out and saw the children's story and thought, maybe I should talk to my child about Christ, even though I'm struggling with it myself. And so those were some of the best conversations to sit down and kind of have with people.
I think so many readers will be blessed by this book. Again, it's titled Mulligan. It's written by Jessie Adkinson and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So you can find it everywhere Head over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. You'll be able to pick this up. Jessie, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight. I really appreciate you coming on the show here and telling me all about Mulligan. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you for your time and having me.
The audiobook edition of Tony Hirner's book, Separated from Grace, Speak No Evil, Book 1, is out now. And that's what we're going to be talking about right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. The author Tony is joining me. Tony, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you, and I'm happy to be learning about Separated from Grace. So what can readers and audiobook listeners find here?
It's pretty rich. I'm really kind of proud of this book because it's basically based on why this one character basically exists. He's struggling with the meaning of his life, and there's a lot of philosophy thrown out in the book, and there's quotes from famous philosophers and famous people in general. There's a lot of biblical verse, and there's just a lot of knowledge thrown out there about why and what the meaning is of why we're here.
And Tony, what sorts of readers were you speaking to?
I think a person could pick up this book at 11 or 12 years old and they could read it at 65. It's really kind of a wide range of people. I mean, that's a spiritual book, and it's got some fantasy and some make-believe stuff too. You know, it's a little, there's some characters that are a little cartoony, but it's rich.
So how did this come into being, Tony? Where'd you get the idea for this?
I actually started with the book it's going to end up being the 7th book. When I first started that book, it was called Unburied, and I used a pen name, Anton Stone. It was referring to like the insignificance of our life. You know, I'm an ant on a stone. I have a niece who's autistic. She just lights up the room, or if she's sad, it seems like the world is sad. You know, if she's angry, it seems like she affects the environment around her. So I wrote a book with the main character based on her, and it's a prophet named Sonny Fennell. And so I started with that, and then I started the second book, and I really wasn't going the way I wanted it to. So I started another book. I started that Separated from Grace, and it wasn't intended to have anything to do with the other two books. It just turned out when I got about halfway through the book, I realized that I could link this book to the other one, but it was over 100 years earlier. So I had to make it a series of books so that I could lead from 1895 to 2065 when the prophet comes. So it just turned into something where I have something to aim at. I ended up putting it in an old man's dream as he's trying to make significance of his life.
So before you started writing these, Tony, what does your writing background look like? Have you ever done anything like this before?
I was writing some books with my cousin. And my cousin Zach and I moved in together probably 15 years ago. It was longer than that. It was probably almost 20 years ago. We moved in together, and he was a computer guy, and I wanted to be a comic book artist. We got to talk about some of the things we were interested in. He said, you know, I'd really like to write a book, and I know how. I just don't have any ideas, and I'm an idea guy. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I got all the ideas in the world. And we kind of sat down and started collaborating on a book called Birds of a Feather. Then we went into a second book. And I ended up putting Birds of a Feather in this, too. I ended up rewriting that and putting it at the end of the second and third book. Birds of a Feather is broke up, and it's a story that reflects on some of this, too. You know, so there's other aspects of the whole thing. I put short stories at the end of the book that are relevant to the story as it goes along.
And I can only imagine what you were thinking and what you were feeling that day when you finally got the first copy in and you got to hold it and look at it. What was that like for you, Tony?
It's very, very cool when you get a box full of books in the mail and you open it up and your books are there and you get to sell them to your friends or give them out as presents. And that's a very, very cool feeling.
And of course, we're talking about the audiobook edition. So what was it like, Tony? After all that time, you wrote the book, you were reading the words off the page. Now all of a sudden you're hearing your own book read to you. What was that like?
That's very cool too. You know, when you start that thing, it starts to, they come at you with you get to pick your reader, you know, you get to pick the narrator. And so they come at you with 4 or 5 different actors and you tell them what kind of actor's voice you would like. And you pick, I told them that I wanted somebody that was similar to Kevin Spacey and actors like that. And they came at me with 4 or 5 different people and I was able to pick the voice that I really liked. So it's really a neat process.
Well, this sounds like a book and an audiobook I think a lot of people are going to be into. Again, it's titled Separated from Grace, Speak No Evil, Book 1. It's written by Tony Hirner, and it's published by the Audiobook Network. So go on over to Audible or iTunes or Amazon, really anywhere that you get your audiobooks, you'll be able to pick this one up. Tony, it's been really great talking with you tonight. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
The Happiest You. Taking you from jobs, fatigue, spouse, kids, and stress to your talent, appreciation, and wealth. That's the name of the new book written by Tammy Mayo, and it's an empowering resource for personal and spiritual growth. We're going to be talking all about this book. The author, Tammy, is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Tammy, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Tammy, can you tell me all about The Happiest You and what readers are going to be getting into here?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a physician. I've been working in primary care for over 20 years, and I am always happy. Basically been happy since birth, and so people always ask me, why are you always so happy? How do you maintain happiness? Because obviously things happen in my life just like they do in other people's lives, but they don't affect me for long, and so everybody kept saying you should let the world know how you maintain this, and so I wrote the book, The Happiest You.
Wow, this certainly is needed. What sorts of readers were you writing for? Did you have a specific audience in mind?
You know what? I really did. I basically wanted a book that was easy to read. Okay, so it's not a long book and it's easy to read. I made sure the words were a little bit larger than usual for anybody wearing readers. I wanted it to be just for the average person, an easy read, maybe even for people that don't really want to read a book. So I wanted everybody to be able to get this information and get it quickly and efficiently, and there's not any technical medical terminology in there. It's not hard to read at all, and that's my target. It's just the average person.
And when it comes to writing, publishing, and all of that, Tammy, are you new to this whole world, or have you done this kind of thing before?
No, brand new. But I've already started on the second book, so I'm going to say, maybe I shouldn't say brand new because it's all the second book, but this is the first book, yes.
Wow, congratulations. Did this first one take you a long time to write and publish then, being your first?
You know what, that's a great question. It really didn't, because I had the concept in my mind for a while. And basically, once I started writing, it just came out. I just put it all down. This second book is going to be a lot more in depth. So I'll go into things like manifesting and meditation with the second book. So this is probably going to take a little bit longer. But the first book, it was just, the thoughts were already there in my mind, and I just let it flow with the pen when it was time.
And I can only imagine what was going through your head and what you were feeling that day when you open up your mailbox and there it finally was, The Happiest You, your first copy. You got to hold this thing. What was that like, Tammy?
Oh, gosh. I was holding the best copy, which is the hardback. To me, that one just looks the best. It feels good, this sounds silly, but it feels like a real book. To me, the paperback, just because it's a short book, kind of flimsy, but the hardback, when I was holding that, and the pictures were nice, the picture on the back, I look like I'm really enjoying life. And it felt fabulous. I mean, it just felt fabulous. I was so happy that now I can, instead of spending 2 hours, talking to a patient about trying to get their life straight, I can just direct them to the book.
And now that you're officially a published author, Tammy, what's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
It's basically just knowing that I can help someone else to be happy. It's actually something I'm already doing. As a doctor, people come to me and they'll tell me deepest, darkest secrets and, real problems, that they're having in their life that they would tell other people. And I'm able to kind of work with them about, how to get through those problems. But, one person taking 30 minutes to an hour talking to them, but when you have a book, you can reach so many more people with a message like this. And like I said, it's just so easy to read. There's other books that do kind of teach a little bit of the same thing, but this is just such an easy read. It's not, a person doesn't even have to like reading books to read this.
Well, Tammy, we definitely need more people out there like you, and we need more books out there like this one. It's titled The Happiest You, taking you from jobs, fatigue, spouse, kids, and stress to your talent, appreciation, and wealth. It's written by Tammy Mayo and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it everywhere. Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also down the street at your local bookshop. Well, Tammy, it's been really wonderful talking with you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I appreciate you so much for the invitation.
The new book, written by Roxianne Brown, it's titled Noah's Ark, Book 3, reveals God's incredible sense of humor. It's part of the Tales of the Narrow Path series, and we're going to be talking all about this. The author, Roxianne, is here with me. Roxianne, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you.
Roxianne, can you tell me all about what readers are going to find when they open up Noah's Ark, Book 3?
It is about a mosquito on the ark. Actually, about what other animals on the ark, but it will focus more on the mosquito, Gertrude, and her time above the ark.
That's a really interesting plot. What gave you the idea for it?
My husband. We were sitting outside by the lake, and there was a mosquito. Well, she bit me, at least. And my husband was like, do you know that there was mosquitoes on the ark? And I'm like, nah. And he was like, yeah. So that was where I got the idea, and I decided to write about the mosquito on the ark.
Roxianne, what sorts of readers were you writing this for?
Kids, like for parents, you could read it to your small child, like your toddler, but mostly focused from about 6 to 18. And it's also for adults also. It's a nice, fun-filled book. It's Bible-based, so at least you'll get a different spin on Noah's Ark.
This is the Tales of the Narrow Path series. So before this, what does your writing background look like? Have you been doing a lot of this kind of writing?
Yes, I love writing.
And how long does a book like Noah's Ark take you to write and publish usually?
Okay, for the writing, it took me about 6 months because I had school at the time. So between school and my free time, I just go ahead and write. At least whenever I'm stressed, I just start writing. That's the best place for me to relax. And then the publishing, it took around 6 months for it to be published.
And there's an awful lot involved in that publishing process. Roxianne, what do you find the most challenging part of that for you?
The reader. I'm like, are they going to like this? And then I just start writing. I'm like, okay, if someone doesn't like it, another person will like it. And at least I get to fulfill what I always want to do.
I love that attitude. And when you think about the fact that you're a published author, you have books out there for the world, for you, what's the most rewarding aspect of that?
Hearing people talk about it. It might not be a lot, but some people will just say, oh, I read one of your books. And I'm like, oh, cool. Well, one, reach one. For each person that read it, at least they'll share it.
And I can only imagine that day whenever you get your first copy in and you get to hold your book for the first time. What kind of things are you feeling? What's going through your head?
Oh, it was so exciting. My husband was like, calm down, baby. Breathe. It's okay.
So this is book 3 in the Tales of the Narrow Path series, like we said. Do you have more planned out?
Yes. The other one actually, well, at least I'm working on 2 now. The other one is going to be the Cadaver Lava and the Spirit-Filled Bones. So whichever one is finished first.
And I'm sure that you've learned a lot along the way of publishing and writing and everything. So do you have anything along the way of advice that you could throw out there for the aspiring authors that are listening to us?
Reach out. There's a lot of nice agents out there who are willing to help you. They really do.
Well, it sounds like writing comes pretty easy to you, Roxianne. Do you ever hit those times when the writing gets rough, like maybe you get writer's block and things like that?
Yes, I do. And then I have a funny farm. We have animals like donkeys and goats and chickens, yeah. And we live beside the river there, Ohachi. So sometimes I just walk out or I just start watching crime drama. Those are the best things.
I think so many readers out there are really going to love this book and this series. Again, this is titled Noah's Ark, Book 3, Tales of the Narrow Path series. It's written by Roxianne Brown, published by Covenant Books. So you can find it at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Roxianne, it's been really nice talking with you tonight. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Corey.
The new novel by Mihai Oara is historical fiction that blends fantasy and spirituality. It's titled The Angels Were Amazed. And I get to find out all about this novel. The author, Mihai, is with me now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Mihai, welcome. Thanks for being here with me tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I'm here.
I'm glad to have you here, and I'm really curious about The Angels Were Amazed. So can you tell me all about what readers are going to find here?
I hope that this will be a relevant book for the people that like fantasy, the people that like historical fiction, and I try to have a very extended view of life and of universe and spirituality, so it touches many, many angles.
Would you say this is a book primarily for believers, or is it a wider audience than that?
I think it's a wider audience because the historical fiction part and the fantasy part will be interesting for everybody. In the historical fiction part, I'm addressing what I call history mysteries. So there are some moments in history which are very hard to understand, and the historians are still debating what happened and why it happened. So I am addressing some of that, and I try to find some explanations for them. So I think this will be interesting for everybody.
What does your writing background look like, Mihai? Have you done a lot of this before?
Not of this genre. I had another book which I published called An Accidental Dissident, and it's a memoir about my clashes in Romania in the 70s with the secret police when I was a student in Bucharest.
So being your first historical fiction, did this take you a long time to write and get published?
As a matter of fact, not so long. Maybe it took about 6 months to write. That's because when you get in a kind of enchanted time where you get inspiration, then the writing goes very, very quickly. And of course, then I had to take some time to revisit it and edit and make corrections. But writing itself didn't take too much.
Yeah, it's great when you get into that flow and the words keep going. But do you ever hit those times when it gets challenging? Maybe you get writer's block and things like that?
You know, if I would be to write something right now, maybe I'll get it. But as I said, at that time when the inspiration was flowing, it was just flowing. So it became very, very easy and pleasant, in fact. It's almost like I was reading something myself. The ideas and the images and the story came into my mind, and I just put it on, I wouldn't say on paper, on a computer.
Then once you have that manuscript done, you hand it off to your publisher, you start that publishing process. There's an awful lot involved in that. Mihai, what do you find the most challenging part of the publishing process for you?
You know, making all the arrangements, the commercial part, the contracts and so forth, because that's something less interesting than writing itself. My calling is writing, is not doing commercial arrangements. They are necessary. You know, you buy a car, you enjoy the car a lot, but you have to learn, sign some contracts. So that's a necessary part.
And then after all that time of writing and publishing, that day comes for you. You open up the mailbox, and there it is, your first copy of The Angels Were Amazed. You get to hold this thing in your hands for the first time, Mihai. What was that moment like for you?
It's really a joy. It's like your wife had a new baby, so now you go and you see the baby for the first time. You're kind of in awe. You're amazed. You like it very much. You want to feel it in your hands, show it to some friends, give it as a gift to some friends to read and see what reactions they have. So it's really a pleasant moment.
And when you think about it, you're a published author. Mihai, what's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
The most rewarding aspect is the writing itself. It's like a trance, you dive very deep into the story and you live it. So that really is something that gave me a lot of satisfaction.
And this can be quite the learning experience, publishing all of this. So is there anything you've picked up along the way, Mihai, that you could put out there as advice for the aspiring authors who are listening to us?
Yes. Don't write for success. Don't write for money. Write because you have something to say. And then everything becomes very easy. And then you take care of the other practicalities.
Again, the title is The Angels Were Amazed. It's written by Mihai Oara and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Mihai, thank you again for coming on the show and telling me about this book. I had a really nice time talking with you.
And I hope that your listeners and my readers will really enjoy the book. Thank you.
The Cats Are Gone. It's the new book written by Cait West. It's a story of acceptance and self-discovery. We're going to be talking all about it right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. The author, Cait, is with me. Cait, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be here.
Cait, can you tell me all about what readers are going to find in The Catragon?
Well, it's the story of a misunderstood animal named Smokey. He is part cat, part dragon, and he is sadly separated from his biological family, and he gets adopted by friendly tabby cats and raised as one of their own. And he starts to discover his origin and more about himself.
Cait, what kinds of readers were you writing this for?
Well, it's aimed at anyone who wants to read it, but it's categorized as a kid's book because I think kids will enjoy it most, but there are adults who like it too.
And when it comes to writing, publishing, and all of that, Cait, are you new to it or have you done this before?
I'm new to it. I started writing when I went to my creative writing class at UAH.
And when it comes to The Catragon, what sparked this idea? Where'd it come from?
It started off as a writing prompt for my class, and the prompt was, you got to have two characters, they have to have a problem, and you tell how they solve it, and you start in the middle of the action. So it started off as a short story, and it didn't really have a backstory at first. I added that in later when I got ready to make it into a full book, which I decided to write it into a book because everybody loves it so much, and everybody loves Smokey's character.
And once you decided to get serious with it and make it into a book, how long of a process was that for you, the publishing and everything?
It took about a year and possibly a few more months.
And once you handed this over to your publisher and began that publishing process, there's an awful lot of things that you got to do. Cait, what did you find the most challenging part of the publishing process?
Getting the illustrations right.
And I can only imagine what you were feeling and what was going through your head that day when you finally got the first copy in of The Catragon and you got to look at this thing. I mean, your name's on the cover and everything. It must have been quite a moment for you.
Yeah, it was like my greatest accomplishment in life.
Have you given thought to writing more, maybe doing a follow-up to The Catragon or some other sort of writing here in the future?
Well, I'm working on a sequel to The Catragon right now.
Fantastic. When you're writing, Cait, do you ever experience writer's block or any of those kinds of challenges?
I've had problems coming up with a few ideas, but for the most part, it comes pretty easy. There have been times where I had to go back and rewrite something because I didn't think the idea was working as well as I wanted it to.
And now that you're officially a published author, Cait, what's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
Getting the work accomplished and seeing how many people enjoy reading it and what their reviews on my story are.
And when you do this kind of thing for the first time, it can be quite the learning experience. Is there anything you might have picked up along the way, Cait, that you could put out there as advice for the new authors who are listening to us?
Well, for new authors, I think they should just go for it. You should sit down and write out any ideas you have in mind. And then after you get that part done, the edits and grammar fixes are coming easy. And it's easier to come up with a title once the big part's done as well.
Yeah, good advice. You know, I talk with a lot of authors, and most of the time, they're also big readers. So, Cait, would you call yourself a big reader?
Yes, I like to read a lot of mangas and comic books, and I like novels as well. Love those books.
Okay, when you decide you're going to write, do you have a certain time of day that you like to do it? You know, some of us like to get up really early and write, and some of us like to stay up late at night and write. Or are you the kind of author that just writes whenever you feel inspired or you have that time?
I write when I feel inspired or when a new idea comes to me.
Again, it's titled The Catragon. It's written by Cait West and is published by Christian Faith Publishing. So go on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. You'll be able to pick this up. Cait, thank you again for joining me and telling me all about The Catragon. I had a nice time.
Thank you for inviting me to be on the show.
There's an exciting science fiction voyage in the new book written by Julia Hallmark. It's titled Once Upon a Mountain, and we're going to be talking all about this book. The author, Julia, is with me now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Julia, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here with me tonight.
Thank you so much for your warm welcome, Corey. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's a pleasure to be talking with you, Julia. Can you tell me all about Once Upon a Mountain and what readers are going to find here?
Well, Once Upon a Mountain is a story of what happens when God chooses an unassuming family to become missionaries to alien civilization. And this very first book is the book of the young daughter of the family. Her name is Jenna. And her father, Brian, are going for a walk on Mount Diablo when a interdimensional portal opens up and sucks them in. And the dad goes to an entirely different planet, and he's going to be in a later book. But Jenna goes to the planet Sasqui, which is actually where what we call Sasquatch come from. And she finds herself in a hostile environment with very volatile beings. How she got there was that these beings had been praying and asking God to bring back some of their lost tribes. And he sent Jenna to help with that. And so what ends up happening is the entire civilization of the Sasqui, as they call themselves, gets turned on its head as they have an opportunity to meet Jesus. And as God begins doing miracles among them and totally upsets their apple cart of what and who they thought God was. So this is about what Jenna goes through, having only her faith in God and her relationship with God to see her through, and how God shepherds her into how to relate to an entirely alien civilization. And as a result, the Sasqui will get their prayers answered, but not necessarily the way they want them.
Wow, this whole thing is so creative, Julia. You got to tell me, how'd you get the idea for all this?
Well, actually, I got it in a few kind of odd places. The whole idea about having an interdimensional doorway leading to a planet of Sasquatch came from Mr. Bailey. He does stories about odd and mysterious things that some are actually true and some are false. And one of the stories he did was about a little child who suddenly disappeared from their family while they were hiking, like within just seconds of their turning their back. And the child ends up several hundred miles away on an entirely different mountain when they do finally, by accident, find this kid. And they ask the kid, well, how did you get here? And he said, well, a great big hairy ape man brought me here. And so that was the kernel of the story, in which I thought, well, how did the quote-unquote ape man take the kid there? And I thought, what if there are interdimensional doorways between planets? And so this ape man took this kid through an interdimensional doorway. And that is the seed of the book. And then in terms of the whole faith aspect, I have always been fascinated by how God takes people and uses them like fish out of water and puts them into completely odd situations and then works powerfully through them. Like, for instance, with the disciples with Jesus, they were just fishermen. And all of a sudden, the Son of God saying, come with me. I'm going to show you how to be fishers of men instead of fish. And so they end up going on this mission with Jesus, where everyone is remarking, like, how did these fishermen get to have so much wisdom? And then the only answer is, well, they were with that guy, Jesus. And so that is part of where I got the spiritual point of view, plus from Paul's quote where he talks about being everything to everyone so that by some means he could save some. And so the characters in this series of novels are going to find themselves having to adapt to alien civilizations in situations where they have absolutely no preparation to be there, and then they'll have to rely on God to help them to navigate what's going on.
Well, this sounds so exciting. It's so creative. I think a lot of readers are really going to love this. Again, the title is Once Upon a Mountain. It's written by Julia Hallmark and is published by Christian Faith Publishing. So you can find it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or also down the street at your local bookshop. Well, Julia, thank you again for coming on the show and telling me all about this. I had a really nice time talking with you.
I had a pleasure talking with you, Corey. It was a true joy. Thank you so much for making me so welcome.
I'm looking at the new book by Adam Kornegay. It's a deeply personal journey of grief, faith, and finding profound peace in the midst of tragedy. It's titled Facing the Impossible, a father's devotional of loss, love, and life. We're going to be talking all about this book. The author, Adam, is here with me now. Adam, welcome. I really appreciate you being here with me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm curious to learn all about what readers will find in Facing the Impossible, Adam. Can you tell me all about it?
Yeah, well, this devotional was kind of put on my heart about 8 months or so after my younger daughter, she was 24 when she passed away. And it took another 2.5 years, I think, before I actually started writing it. There was just not really having the confidence in myself to be able to do something like this. This is the first time I've ever written anything. God kept putting it on my heart to write this and to let people know about the journey that we walked through during the first weeks after my daughter passed away. It was quite emotional, as you can imagine. Roller coaster, had never gone through anything like that. And what was really cool was very quickly I started leaning into my faith and just starting to question, what is it that I really believe? And it was during that process of figuring out where the rubber meets the road that God just showed me a lot of things. And that's what I felt like I needed to put pen to paper on and write this devotional for others to hopefully be inspired.
Would you say you wrote this primarily for readers who have gone through the same experiences that you have?
Yes, I think it's primarily written for people who suffered any type of human loss, but the processes by which we grieve when we lose a job, when we have financial difficulties, when we go through hardship in life, many of the same processes are the same human processes that we go through when we're grieving. So I still think that there's something there for just about anybody who's experienced loss of any kind.
Once you got started on this, Adam, how long of a journey was this for you, clear up through when it was published and ready to go out?
So I started actually writing it in March of 23, and it took me about 3.5 to 4 months to write it. Then, of course, I found a really nice editor who worked with me to kind of clean it up. And then I was blessed enough to have Christian Faith Publishing pick this up, and it was published. I believe the publish date was May 15 of 24. The whole process, I guess, took, about 15 months.
In that publishing process, there's a lot involved in there, a lot of things you got to do. What did you find the most challenging part of the publishing end of things?
Just trying to find a publisher, somebody who would actually take a first-time author without having any sort of street cred, if you will. So I obviously went through quite a few rejections, and it's challenging for a young author or new author to try to figure out how to navigate the pathway. And of course, there's different publishers for different topics also. So it's a confusing world, but I just kept plugging away and feel very fortunate Christian Faith Publishing picked this up.
And I can only imagine what you were thinking, what you're feeling whenever you got your first copy of this in and you finally got to hold this in your hands, Adam. What kind of a moment was that like for you?
Surreal. Very surreal. That means a lot. Everything from the cover of the book, the way, that came about, to the words on the page. It's very meaningful, very therapeutic. Just about everything that you could possibly imagine. Very proud. Yeah, a lot of emotions wrapped up in one.
Well, looking ahead, do you think you would write another and have more published?
I actually do. I've got another idea that I'm playing around with, kind of playing off the same theme, Facing the Impossible. We'll have completely different tone and it'll go in a different direction. But yeah, I'm hoping to maybe have something out in another year or so.
And now that you are published, now that your work is out there for the world, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
Just that you can do it. I can go from a place where I didn't believe in myself to a place where you believe that you can accomplish just about anything. This was an incredible experience. It was very therapeutic to go through this process also, but just very, very rewarding. And it just makes me feel like there really isn't anything that I can't accomplish when God is blazing that trail.
Well, this sounds like a truly powerful book. Again, it's titled Facing the Impossible, a father's devotional of loss, love, and life. It's written by Adam Kornegay and is published by Christian Faith Publishing. So you can find it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Adam, thank you again for coming on the show and telling me about your story and about this book. I had a really nice time.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I did too.
Author Michele Ortega's new book, Testimonies of Faith, contains an uplifting spiritual journey. And we're going to be talking all about this book right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. The author, Michele, is joining me.
Michele, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to be talking with you. Michele, can you tell me all about Testimonies of Faith and what readers can find here?
Absolutely. Testimonies of Faith is a book that includes my personal testimonies, the challenges and the trials that I encountered in my life, and it illustrates how God answered my prayers when I called on Him.
What inspired you to write your story and publish it for the world?
God inspired me to write. Basically, God came to me in my dreams for 2 consecutive nights, and He pretty much gave me the name of the book, Testimonies of Faith.
What sorts of readers were you writing this for?
Basically, everyone, the entire world, because people are experiencing so many challenges. They're hurting. They need to know that God answers prayer, and He is real, and it's important for everyone to keep the faith.
When it comes to writing and publishing, everything like that, Michele, are you experienced in this, or are you fairly new to it?
I am not. I never thought that I would be a writer, especially a writer of a Christian book. Trust me.
And once you sat down and got started writing this, clear up through the publishing process when it was out there for everybody, how long of a journey was this for you?
I started writing this book in the year 2020, and would you believe I had so many challenges while writing. I didn't believe I would complete this book. It took a year and a half for me to complete this book. I just kept on focusing on it, and God reminded me, I need you to do this for me.
And a lot of time, a lot of hard work went into this, Michele. So when that day finally came and you got your first copy in, you got to hold Testimonies of Faith in your hands for that first time. What was that like for you?
Oh, I was elated. I was so happy. I had a permanent smile on my face. I was excited. But the real fulfillment for me was when the readers came to me and they said, Michele, wow, I'm impressed with your book. It made a difference in my life. It was at that moment that I realized I accomplished my goal.
And looking down the road, what are the chances we're going to see more books from you here in the future?
Well, at this time, I'm not working on writing any, but my readers are asking me for part 2. So if God wants me to keep writing, I'll continue on.
Wonderful. And now when you think about it, you're officially a published author now. Michele, what's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
Basically, knowing that I'm making a difference in the lives of everyone that reads this book, hearing their story. Everyone has a story. You know, I've had readers tell me, you've poured your heart out in this book. It brought tears to my eyes, and they get all emotional. And knowing that I'm able to touch the lives of many is truly fulfilling for me.
And a lot of new authors are often surprised at how much is involved in the publishing process once you hand that manuscript over to your publisher. And Michele, when you think about the publishing process, what's the most challenging part of it for you?
Staying on task, staying focused, I would say. But my advice to them, to any potential writers, is to keep pressing on. Don't give up. And I would also remind them of the quotation by Theodore Roosevelt that says, believe you can and you're halfway there.
Yeah, that's some great advice. So do you ever hit those times, Michele, whenever the writing gets a little bit tough and maybe you experience writer's block and things like that? And how do you get through those times?
For Testimonies of Faith, what I did is I would pray. I would go into praying and I would say, God, I need you right now, and tell me what you want me to tell your people. And believe it or not, when I was done praying, my thoughts would just flow. It was truly amazing.
I talk with a lot of authors, and I found they're often big readers. So, Michele, what sort of a reader are you?
I'm open to any genre. My favorites are inspirational and, believe it or not, romantic novels.
I think a lot of readers are definitely going to be blessed by this book. And if you're listening right now, I encourage you to go seek this out. Again, it's titled Testimonies of Faith. It's written by Michele Ortega and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So you can pick it up at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Michele, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about this book. I had a nice time talking with you tonight.
Oh, same here. I enjoyed my time with you. Thank you.
If you're a mother, then the book I'm looking at right now is definitely for you. It's called Pep Talks for Moms: How the Stuff of Motherhood Can Be Transformative. This is a book written by Abigail J. Stevens, and we get to talk all about this right now. Abigail is here with me. Abigail, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks. Thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm curious about Pep Talks for Moms. Abigail, can you tell me all about this?
Sure. Well, this is a collection of blogs that I've written probably over the last 8-9 years while having children. And writing is really how I process life and situations and tricky things that come up as a mom. And so they started as journals, and then I tidied them up and made them more applicable to everyone, and then posted them on my blog. And then not too long ago, I tried several avenues for what to do with my time with all my 3 kids in school, and several doors shut, but the door for publishing opened. So I tidied up a bunch of blogs and put them together, and that's how this book came about.
Was there anything in specific that made you say, hey, I want to write this book, I want to collect these blog posts, I want to get this thing published?
Really, it was the open door that gave me the green light, and several opportunities and a lot of encouragement from my family and my friends, encouragement that this was really something not only that I was equipped to do and able to do, but that was really already half done. You know, writing is just something, it just kind of pours out of me. And so whether I was going to get published or not, you know, I continue to process things through writing. And the putting it in book form really made it so that I could share with others these gifts that I think the Lord has given to me. And I don't just mean the writing bit, but the information and the wisdom and the way in which He really equips mothers to use what He has, the gifts from the Lord, to be good moms.
Oh, obviously, you've written a lot, but when it comes to publishing, have you been published before this?
I've been published in small periodicals and magazines here and there, but this is the first book, so that's pretty exciting to have it all in a book form and to be able to share it and to have this out also, I think, as a tool that could be used in sharing the gospel. Because each of the chapters in here, they're just so short. You know, a mom could read it in 1 to 2 minutes. And they start with very real situations that all moms face. You know, kids are fighting, something happens at school, we get hurt by a spouse or a friend or a family member. Each chapter starts with some kind of scenario and then works through how the Lord really does offer us His heavenly gifts to combat the lies in our life or the inadequacies and face each of these situations in a way that's capable and full of wisdom and grace and love. So each of these chapters, they're very simple, very short. I feel like anybody could just pick it up. They could turn anywhere in the book and read a chapter, and it's going to point them to the Lord. So this could both be kind of a pick-me-up for people who know the Lord, and also it could lead people to the Lord who maybe don't know Him already. This could also be something that, let's say, a grandma has kids who are not walking with the Lord or who maybe grew up in the church, but kind of, you know, they've walked away from the faith. This could be an excellent gift to a new mom that is going to kind of revive and remind them of what the gospel can do in their lives as they're facing reality with, you know, being a mom. And I say a mom because I'm a mom, and that's, you know, the title of the book, but this could be for dads, this could be for grandmas, this could be for caretakers. It really has quite a wide audience here. And each of the little chapters, they kind of almost work as a devotional, but also there's many of them in there that are just, you know, humorous, but also the real stuff, the mistakes that I've made, or just the false thoughts that moms can get wrapped up in.
Well, I really think that moms and dads and a lot of others are really going to get a lot out of this book. Again, it's titled Pep Talks for Moms, How the Stuff of Motherhood Can Be Transformative. This is written by Abigail J. Stevens, published by Christian Faith Publishing. So go on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. You'll be able to find this. Well, Abigail, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, and thank you very much for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.